Please don't go yet. If you go, nobody comes until morning. It was 9:10 on a Thursday night in November, in the marble elevator lobby of a Hanamdong penthouse that smelled of cold stone and nothing else, when Adaeze Okonkwo, a Nigerian florist down to her last delivery of the night, stopped walking. The boy who whispered it carried a surname that owned 3 towers on that street. Adaeze expected to set the flowers down, apologize for the wrong floor, and mind her visa. What she wrote instead, on a small blank card, would be kept for years. The slip in her apron pocket said Tower B, 43rd floor, Han. She had shown it to the night concierge, who barely looked up before waving her toward the left bank of elevators. 14 deliveries since noon. 2 hours of traffic in a November wind that came off the Han River and found every gap in her jacket. The last bouquet of the day was white peonies and eucalyptus, wrapped in gray paper, ordered at 6:40 in cash by a man who had asked for no card. The doors opened into a single apartment. No corridor, no second door, no nameplate. Only a wide, dark entry with 4 pairs of shoes lined up in a row too straight to be casual, and a boy in white socks standing at the edge of the marble as though the floor beyond it belonged to somebody stricter. 9 years old, maybe 10, he held a phone with a dead screen. Behind him, the rooms went on and on into an unlit gray, and nothing in them made a sound. Adaeze did the arithmetic she always did. The shop on the slope behind Gyeongridan-gil closed at 10, and Mrs. Baek counted the till before she counted anybody's kindness. 3 months of payments stood between Adaeze and owning that shop outright. Her sister's school fees in Enugu were due on the 15th. Every minute she spent in this hallway cost her something she could name down to the one. She looked at the boy. She looked at the flowers that belonged to a stranger on another floor. Then she took the little blank card from her apron, the kind she filled out 50 times a week, in careful Korean on one side and careful English on the other, and uncapped her pen. 43 floors below, in a car that had not yet pulled away from the ramp, a man was being told, very quietly, that his son had opened the door. She wrote the first line before she let herself think about the time. Boiling water burns, he is fine now. Careful Korean on the front of the card, the letters upright and slightly too round, the way her language school teacher had taught her. Then she turned the card over for the English, and stopped, because the boy in the doorway had begun to shake. Adaeze put the pen back in her apron, set the peonies on the marble console, 268,000 won of white peony and eucalyptus, wrapped in brown paper and jute, belonging to a woman on the 34th floor who was expecting them before her guests arrived, and knelt down on the cold stone of a foyer that was bigger than the room she rented in Itaewon. "Show me," she said. He held out his left hand. The inside of his wrist had gone the wet pink of a peeled plum, and 2 fingers were shining where the skin had lifted. Behind him, in a kitchen with an island the length of a bus stop, a small steel pot sat on an induction hob still glowing at level 9, and inside the pot, the last of the water had gone to black. A dining chair had been dragged over to the counter. On the floor beside it lay a torn ramyeon packet and a school bag with a name tag, Seo Ha-jun, 8 years old, 2nd grade. Adaeze stepped past him, tapped the hob off with 2 knuckles, and slid the pot into the empty sink. Then she turned the cold tap on and put his hand under it, cupping his elbow so he could not pull away. He pulled away anyway. She held on. 20 minutes, she said. Cold water, 20 minutes. Not ice, not toothpaste, not butter, whatever your grandmother says. Her mother had said that too, in a clinic in Enugu with a ceiling fan that clicked, back when Adaeze still thought she would finish nursing school in 4 years instead of leaving it at 2.5. Look at me, you are not in trouble. The boy looked at her. He did not answer. She waited, and the waiting stretched, and she understood something from the shape of his mouth. He was not refusing to speak to a stranger. He was not refusing at all. The sound simply was not there. "Okay," she said, gentler. Then nod. "Are you alone?" He nodded. "Is somebody coming?" He nodded again, and then held up 2 fingers, and then made a wobbling motion with his hand that she chose to read as soon, maybe, I don't know. Her phone buzzed against her hip. 3406, Mrs. Nam, calling. Adaeze looked at the water running over the child's fingers and did the arithmetic she had been doing since the day she landed at Incheon with 1 suitcase and a bank card that only worked twice. Late delivery, 15,001 docked. Refused delivery. The whole arrangement charged back to her, or half if Mrs. Beck was in a good mood, and Mrs. Beck's good moods lived mostly in June. Her language school payment was due Thursday. Her brother's school fees in Nsuka were due the week after. Her visa sat on the shoulders of a small flower shop with a blue thistle on its window, and small flower shops do not sponsor florists who make rich people angry. She let the phone ring out. 20 minutes, she said again, and reached across him for a clean tea towel, folded it, and slid it under his elbow so his arm could rest on the sink edge without cramping. The apartment made no sound at all. That was the thing she would remember later, more than the marble or the glass wall with the river bending under it. 43 floors up, in a home with a piano nobody had opened, there was no radio, no television, no rice cooker sighing, no shoes kicked off crooked in the entryway. Just an 8-year-old in his school uniform, still buttoned to the throat at 7:20 in the evening, who had dragged a chair to the stove because he was hungry and there had been nobody to ask. With her free hand, she opened the refrigerator. Bottled water in rows. 4 glass containers of side dishes with dates written on masking tape, eggs. She took out 3 eggs with 2 fingers and set them on the counter. "When your hand is done, I am making you something," she said. "Not pepper soup. You are not ready." He watched her, unblinking. At 7:41, she turned off the tap, patted his wrist dry around the burn without touching it, and looked through 4 drawers before she found a first aid box that had never been opened. Sterile gauze. She wrapped the wrist loose, the way you wrap something you want air to reach, and taped it with 2 small strips. Then she cracked the eggs into a pan, added a splash of water and a pinch of salt, stirred them slow over low heat the way her mother did for children with no appetite, and slid them onto a plate with a wall of white rice from the cooker she found hidden behind a cabinet panel. He ate with his right hand, fast, then slower. Halfway through he stopped and pushed the plate an inch toward her, offering. A daisy's throat did something complicated. "I already ate," she lied, and picked up her pen again. She finished the card standing at the island, the Korean on one side, and on the other, in English, in the same careful upright hand. Steam burn, left wrist and 2 fingers. Cooled 20 minutes in running water. Wrapped loose. Please change tomorrow morning and let air reach it. No ointment yet. If it blisters bigger than a coin, take him to a clinic. He turned off nothing wrong. He was hungry, and he was alone, and he did the best thing an 8-year-old could think of. Please do not scold him for it. She hesitated over the last line for the length of one breath. Someone came. Someone came. She did not sign it. The card already carried the shop's name on the front, pressed paper with a dried sprig of pine in the corner, and a name of her own felt like asking for something in return. She set the card upright against the water glass on the low table, where the light from the corridor would find it before anything else did. Then she worked fast, the way she always worked when she was already late. She turned the gas valve at the wall until it clicked shut, and pressed it once more to be sure. She carried the scorched pot to the sink and ran it full so the burnt ring would lift by morning instead of setting like cement. She opened the window a hand's width and hooked it there, because the whole apartment smelled of dry noodles and hot metal, and a smell like that stays in a room longer than the accident that made it. She folded the gray throw over the boy's legs and left his bandaged hand outside the blanket, raised on a cushion, the loose gauze breathing. In her delivery bag, one of the peony heads had snapped at the lift doors an hour earlier, its stem hanging by a thread of green. She had planned to eat that loss quietly. She trimmed it short with the shop scissors, dropped it into the water glass, and the white head opened against the rim like something spilled on purpose. She checked his hand a final time. 2 fingertips and the pad below the thumb, pink and shining, no blister yet wider than a 501 coin. She counted his breaths to 12. Then she stood, shouldered the bag, and let herself out with her elbow so her palm would not touch the handle again. In the corridor she stopped. 11 seconds, the camera above the fire door would later say. She stood there with her helmet under her arm and thought about knocking on the door across the landing, about the security desk in the lobby, about a woman with a foreign passport explaining to a Korean police officer why she had gone inside a stranger's home. She got into the lift instead. The order slip in her jacket said Tower B, 41st floor. She had walked into Tower A because the 2 lobbies were built as mirrors of each other, and the guard had waved her through with his eyes on a baseball highlight, and because the keypad code the shop gave her had worked on the first try, which was the part she would keep turning over for weeks. By the time she found the right tower, it was 20 past 10. The client came to the door in a silk robe with her phone still lit in her hand. The video call had ended at 9:40. Her mother in Busan had blown out candles on a cake with no flowers beside it, and now the flowers were here, warm-stemmed, one head missing from the count of 9, arriving like an apology nobody had asked for. "Take them back," the woman said, not cruelly, tiredly. "I already told the shop." Downstairs she sat on her scooter in the cold and did the arithmetic on the back of the same pad she wrote orders on, because she had learned early that panic shrinks when you give it numbers. 58,001 for the bouquet, 20,000 for the delivery fee she would not be paid. Mrs. Ha would take both out of the month, plus the peony head, because Mrs. Ha ran a shop with 4 buckets and no margin and had a rule about late deliveries that she recited like a weather forecast. 410,001 had to leave the country by the 15th for her mother's tablets and her cousin's school levy. Another 200 went every month into the envelope she did not tell anyone about, the one for the shuttered stall near Mangwon Market with the good north light, whose landlord had told her the deposit in a tone that meant he did not expect to see her again. So the number was 78,000 won, and 1 dead peony, and the 2 hours she had not been paid for. Mrs. Ha was still awake at 11, cutting stems into a bin. "Where were you?" There it was, the whole answer, sitting behind her teeth. A burnt pot. A boy on the floor of a kitchen bigger than her apartment, holding his own hand like a bird he had found. The gauze from the shop's first aid tin. The 11 seconds in the corridor. "Wrong tower," she said. "My mistake." Mrs. Ha grunted and wrote a figure on the wall calendar, and that was that. Some kindnesses cost money. Some cost the right to explain yourself. She had known which one this would be before she pressed the doorbell the second time. The boy's father came home at 1:10 in the morning, and he came home the way he had come home for 19 months. Shoes off in the dark, tie already loosened in the lift, phone face down in his palm so the screen light would not wake anyone. The window was open. That was the first wrong thing. Then the smell, faint and sweet burnt. Then the pot standing in still water like something surrendered. His son was asleep on the sofa with his hand on a cushion, wrapped in gauze so neat it looked done by a machine, and beside him on the low table stood a water glass with a single broken peony in it, and against that glass a small card with a sprig of pine pressed into the paper. He read it standing up, with his coat still on. 20 minutes in running water, wrapped loose. Change it tomorrow morning and let air reach it. No ointment yet. A clinic if the blister grows wider than a coin. He turned off nothing wrong. He was holding the card, the way he held contracts he did not intend to sign, by the edges, level with his eyes, as if the paper might rearrange itself under pressure. Blue ink, a patient hand, block capitals for the medical parts, small looping script for everything else, and in the upper corner a sprig of pine pressed into the damp fiber, so that the needles had left a green ghost of themselves behind. He turned it over. On the back, a shop stamp the size of a thumbnail. Ondo. Beneath it a phone number with 2 digits blurred where water had touched them. Below the instructions, smaller, as if the writer had argued with herself about whether to include it at all. He was frightened, not careless. Please do not scold him for it. Someone came. Yoon Ji-seok read those 3 sentences twice. Then a third time, standing in his own living room at 12 minutes past midnight, with his coat still buttoned, and the city glittering 47 floors below like something in a display case. He did not wake his son. He went to the kitchen, lifted the pot out of the standing water, and looked at the black ring baked onto its base, ramyeon, from the smell, and rice added to it, which nobody had taught the boy to do. The gas knob was off. The window had been opened by someone who understood that smoke sets off building alarms, and that building alarms bring men in uniforms and questions a 9-year-old cannot answer. At 1 in the morning he called the head of household security. "Someone was inside my home tonight," he said. Between 6 and 8, find out who. Gu Man-suk, who had worked for the family for 19 years, asked whether anything was missing. Ji-suk looked at the water glass on the low table, at the single peony with its broken neck bowed over the rim like a person listening. Find her quietly. He believed when he said it, that he was asking for a small thing. Across the river and up a hill, in a rooftop room in Haebangchon where the floor heating worked in only one corner, Adaeze Nwaigwe was awake and counting money on her bed. She had a biscuit tin for it. Inside the tin, 4 envelopes with Igbo words on them in marker, because Korean letters in her own handwriting still felt borrowed, 1 for rent, 1 for her mother's blood pressure tablets in, 1 for her mother's blood pressure tablets in Enugu, 1 for her brother's school fees in Aba, and 1, the thinnest, marked. Echi. Tomorrow. That envelope had 6,001 in it and had once held 40. She counted on the blanket because the floor was cold everywhere except the corner by the wardrobe, where the heating pipe ran and the linoleum had gone slightly soft. 11:50 on a Wednesday night. Downstairs, a man was arguing with a taximeter. Adayeze laid the bills out in rows the way her mother laid out beans before cooking, discarding the bad ones with a fingernail, and did the arithmetic she had been avoiding since 4 that afternoon. The peony had cost the shop 9,001 wholesale. She had broken its neck at the base with her own thumb, kneeling on a stranger's kitchen floor with a child's wrist under cold water, and she was not going to pretend a bucket had done it. The lateness had cost more. Miss Cha in 4102 had waited 40 minutes for 18 white peonies and had then refused the arrangement entirely because a bouquet delivered late looks apparently like a bouquet nobody wanted. 240,001, refunded. Mrs. Bake had said the word. Half. Twice, in a tone that meant she was still deciding. So, 120,001 plus 9. Rent was due on the 4th. The residence permit renewal fee was due the week after, and immigration liked to see a bank balance that did not look like a heartbeat monitor. Adeze put the money back into the envelopes, put the envelopes back into the biscuit tin, and pressed the lid down until it clicked. Then she sat with her hands flat on the tin and thought about a boy standing in a kitchen the size of her entire rooftop room, holding his burned hand against his chest, saying, "Please don't call anyone." She would do it again. That was the irritating part. She had run the numbers before she knelt down. She remembered doing it, remembered the cold little calculation flicking through her while she reached for the tap, and she had knelt down anyway. The shop opened at 8. She was there at 7:40, because the water in the buckets had to be changed before Mrs. Beck arrived and found a reason. Kokot Jari sat between a dry cleaner and a shuttered nail salon on a Yeonnam-dong side street, 3 meters of frontage and a cooler that hummed like a wasp in a jar. Adayeze worked the mornings in a rubber apron with her sleeves pushed to the elbow, stripping thorns, cutting stems on the diagonal, throwing out yesterday's tulips whose heads had begun to nod. She liked this hour. Nobody spoke to her in the polite, slow Korean people used when they had already decided she would not understand. Mrs. Beck came in at 8:20 with a coffee and the radio news. She did not mention the refund. She mentioned the ribbon order, the wedding on Saturday, the price of eucalyptus, and the fact that some people had no sense of time. Adayeze said, "Yes, Sejongnim." 4 times and kept cutting. At 9:12, a black sedan stopped in the loading bay where the delivery scooters were supposed to park and did not switch off its engine. Mrs. Beck saw it in the mirror she kept angled over the cooler. She set her coffee down, wiped both palms on her apron, and told Adayeze to move the bucket. Adayeze moved the bucket. Water ran across the tiles in a thin gray tongue toward the drain, and she watched it go because watching the floor was easier than watching the door. The man who came in wore a gray suit and a laminated badge on a lanyard, and he greeted Mrs. Beck with the exact amount of politeness a building uses on a shop. He did not want flowers. He wanted Tuesday. 41st floor, West Tower, the residence at the end of the corridor. He said the word. Incident. The way other people said. Invoice. Then he took a clear plastic sleeve from his folder and held it up at the level of Adeze's eyes. Inside was a photocopy. Gray-black, slightly crooked, the corner of the original visible where it had lifted from the glass. Her own handwriting looked back at her, the letters standing up too straight the way they always did, careful as a child's. Let air reach it, no ointment yet, a clinic if the blister grows wider than a coin. She had checked 2 of those words on her phone before she wrote them, standing in a corridor that smelled of new carpet, her hands still cold from the delivery box. "Is this yours?" the man asked. The arithmetic happened fast, and it happened in her body before it happened in her head. If she said nothing, the shop would say the courier agency had made the delivery, and the agency would say the log was wrong, and the log had one name on it that was not hers. Mr. O, the day guard, 58 years old, who had waved her toward the service lift on Tuesday because her arms were full and the freight elevator was stuck on 11. He had not scanned her in. He had said, "Go, go, hurry," and pressed the button with his knuckle. She looked at the photocopy for 2 more seconds. "I wrote it," she said. Mrs. Bake made a small sound, the sound of a woman watching her own shop being carried out the door. The questions were not cruel. That was the part Adayeze would remember later. The man asked them in order, from a printed sheet, ticking boxes with a pen he clicked once between answers. Had she entered the residence? Yes. Had the door been open? Yes. The door had been propped with a shoe. Had she touched the child? Yes. His hand, under cold water, for 11 minutes, by the clock on the oven. Had anyone given her permission? No. Had she taken anything from the residence? No. Had she photographed anything? No. Had she been offered money? No. Had she asked for any? No, Adayeze said. The household has not filed a complaint, he said, still writing. The building is required to. He photocopied her registration card on Mrs. Beck's ancient machine, which groaned and gave him a copy with a black bar across her birth year. He asked her to sign at the bottom of the second page, and she read the whole page first, slowly, out loud in her head, and he waited without sighing, which she counted as a kindness. When he left, the sedan pulled out and the loading bay smelled of exhaust and cut eucalyptus. Mrs. Beck did not shout. She turned off the radio, which was worse. The arrangement had been a condolence stand, white chrysanthemums, 3 ribbons, the client's company name in gold, and it had gone to the wrong tower, the wrong floor, the wrong grief entirely, while a family in Yangjae stood in a funeral hall beside an empty stand and made phone calls. The client was a law office that had ordered from this shop on the 14th of every month for 11 years. At 10:40, the law office's administrator called to cancel the standing order and to request a full refund of 380,000 won. "You will pay half," Mrs. Beck said, "over 2 months, and I am cutting you to 4 days until Chuseok," Adayeze said. "Yes, Sajangnim." She said it in the same voice she had used 4 times that morning about ribbon and eucalyptus and people with no sense of time. Then she went back to the bench and finished stripping the roses, because the wedding was at 11 the next morning, and the roses did not care whose money had been lost. 80 stems. She ran the thorn stripper down each one, turned it, ran it again, laid it in the bucket with the head tilted away from the others so the petals would not bruise. Mrs. Beck's radio played a trot song about a man who left in the spring. The cooler compressor came on and went off. Outside, the Yeonnam-dong street filled with people who had somewhere pleasant to be at 6 in the evening, and Adayeze counted in her head while her hands worked, because her hands had never needed her attention to do this properly. 95,000 won a month for 2 months, taken from her pay for the refund, 1 day of work gone from every week until Chuseok, which was 4 weeks away, which was roughly 280,000 more. Rent on the rooftop room in Mangwon was 450. Her mother's blood pressure tablets and her youngest brother's school fees were 300, sent on the 8th of every month through the app that always asked her twice if she was certain. The Korean proficiency exam fee she had been saving toward was 55,000, and the registration closed on the 12th. So the envelope would have to go. That was the arithmetic. The envelope was a brown one from a stationery shop in Hapjeong, and on the front she had written a number that was supposed to grow. Inside the notebook that lived beside it, on the first page, in blue ink, she had written, Adayeze Flowers, Yeonnam-dong. And under it a date 3 years away, which had felt like a promise on the night she wrote it, and felt on this night like something a younger woman had left behind for her to carry. She finished the roses. She swept the stripped thorns into the dustpan, tipped them into the bin, wiped the bench with the blue cloth, and refilled the buckets with fresh water, because Mrs. Beck measured a person's character by the cloudiness of the water in the morning. She did not cry in the shop. She had a rule about that. Crying at work made you a story people told, and she had spent 2 years in this city becoming a person people simply paid. On the 48th floor of a tower across the river, in a room where the windows held the whole gray width of the Han, a man sat with a small ivory card inside a clear document sleeve. The sleeve was his secretary's doing. He had asked for the card to be kept, and his secretary, trained to hear the shape of an instruction rather than its words, had treated it like evidence. It lay now on the corner of a desk with nothing else on it. He had read the printed line at the top 4 times, the client's message, the kind of sentence accompany orders by the hundred. Then the second line, the handwritten one, the one somebody had added underneath in careful blue letters, slanting slightly at the end as though written standing up, in a hurry, with a marker held between 2 fingers already full of stems. He had not expected the handwriting to do anything to him. He had removed his glasses and set them down, and sat in a chair he had chosen for a room he never sat in, and his throat had closed the way it had not closed in 11 months. Not at the hospital, not at the funeral hall, not in the car afterward with his son buckled beside him saying nothing at all. At 9 that morning he had called the building manager and asked for the delivery log for the 12th floor and the 48th. At 9:40 he had the name of a shop. At 10 he had told his secretary not to send anyone. He had not, in the end, been the one who decided. Friday evening, 6:40, the shop had 1 hour left. Adiaze was tying cellophane around a bunch of Chuseok chrysanthemums for a woman who wanted them to look expensive without costing more than 20,000 won, and also to last until the holiday, which was 9 days away. "Ajuma," Adiaze said, "these will last 9 days if you cut them every second morning and you do not put them near the fruit." "Near the fruit? Fruit makes flowers old." She tucked in a spray of eucalyptus, no charge, and folded the paper the way Mrs. Beck liked it folded. "My aunt's stall in Enugu was next to a mango cellar. Everything died in 4 days and she blamed the sun for 11 years. The woman laughed and paid and went out, and the door chime was still moving when it rang again. A boy came in. School uniform, navy, one shoulder of his bag slipping. 9 years old, maybe 10. Socks pushed down, shoes scuffed white at the toes, and around him the particular stillness of a child who has traveled somewhere alone and has been rehearsing what to say for the entire distance. Mrs. Beck came out from the back wiping her hands. "Are you looking for your mother?" The boy did not answer her. He walked past the bucket of gladioli, past the ribbon spools, and stopped at the counter, and from the front pocket of his bag he took out a small ivory card that had been folded once, against the rules, down the middle. He set it on the counter and flattened it with 2 fingers. "Which one of you wrote this?" he said. Mrs. Beck's face did what faces do when trouble arrives wearing something expensive. "Ah, if there was a mistake with a delivery, that was—" "I did," Adiaze said. She had put down the tape. She could not remember the exact words she had written. She remembered the moment, Tuesday, 4 in the afternoon, the client's blank order form, the instruction. "Just write something suitable." The marker, and the 20 seconds she had spent deciding to write what she would want to read instead of what companies pay for. She remembered the cold air spilling out of the open cooler onto her forearms, the squeak of the marker on the small stiff card, the smell of eucalyptus and wet cardboard, and Mrs. Beck at the front counting change for a schoolgirl who wanted 1 carnation and nothing else. Now the marker lay capped on the workbench between them, and the card she had written was inside a clear plastic document sleeve in a stranger's hand, held the way people hold evidence. He had come in without an umbrella, though it had rained since noon and the alley outside was still shining. Charcoal coat, no scarf, shoes that had never once been rained on properly. His car sat double-parked at the mouth of the alley with its hazard lights ticking, and a younger man in a gray suit stood beside it holding a tablet against his chest like a shield, watching the shop door as if flowers might do something sudden. Mrs. Beck had gone very still behind the register. Then, all at once, she had gone loud. She apologized in 3 registers of politeness, offered a full refund, offered a replacement arrangement of white lilies, offered to deliver it herself, and explained twice that the girl was new, 9 months, only 9 months, and did not fully understand how corporate orders were done in Korea. "She is not new," the man said, without raising his voice. "She has worked here since February of last year. The delivery log has her signature on 406 orders." The silence after that was a different kind of silence. Adiaze felt her pulse in her thumbs. She had already counted the cost of this. She had counted it Wednesday morning, when the client's secretary called screaming about a bouquet that had never reached the 7th floor conference room of Hanmyeong Construction, and Mrs. Beck had discovered the numbers on the delivery slip, 4703 written where 4307 should have been, in the client's own careless hand, and had decided, the way she always decided, that the error belonged to whoever carried the box. 68,000 won for the replacement arrangement. deducted from Saturday's pay. Adeyeze had said yes to that without arguing, because arguing cost more than 68,000 won, and because rent on the studio in Mangwon was due on the 25th, and because her sister's second semester fees in Enugu were due in 11 days, and because her visa lived inside the little folder in Mrs. Beck's desk drawer along with the business registration and the receipts. So she had already paid for the mistake. What she had not planned to pay for was the card. Unit 4703, the man said. The building calls it the East Penthouse. The box arrived at 4:50 on Tuesday. The housekeeper signed for it and left it on the entry table because the name on the invoice was not ours. I'm sorry, Adeyeze said. The floor numbers were transposed on the order form. I should have called the client to confirm. I didn't. Nobody called anyone, he said. That is not why I am here. He turned the sleeve of the small envelope over so the handwriting faced her and set it down on the counter, between the stem cutters and the half-used roll of brown paper. Adeyeze recognized her own capitals before she recognized the envelope. She wrote the way her secondary school teacher in Enugu had beaten into her, upright and evenly spaced, the letters slightly too large for the card. On the printed side was the client's message, typed by somebody in an office who had chosen it from a menu of 6 options. With sincere condolences on your loss. Below that, in blue ink, in her hand. The flowers will last 9 days. Please give yourself at least that long. The cold room hummed behind her. Somewhere in the back, water dripped from the bucket she had overfilled at 4. I wrote that, she said. I know. He did not touch the card again. He stood with his coat still buttoned, rain drying in dark spots across the shoulders. A man who had come in from a car and expected to return to it. Do you do that often? Write on other people's cards? The honest answer was going to cost her something. She gave it anyway. No. Only when the message is wrong. Wrong. White chrysanthemums, 40 stems, and 1 sentence a machine could have chosen. She pulled a length of paper straight without needing to look at it, a habit her hands had when her mind wanted somewhere to go. The family had lost someone. Somebody in that office paid 200,000 won so they would not have to think about it for more than a minute, so I thought about it for them. For the first time he looked past her, at the buckets along the wet concrete floor. Eucalyptus. Ranunculus going over. 3 sunflowers she had not been able to sell because their faces had turned in the van. The arrangement did not reach the family, he said. I know. I sent a replacement on Wednesday morning and refunded the difference. The widow in the West Penthouse got hers. It was late by 14 hours and I have apologized to her secretary twice. And the box that came to the East Penthouse was signed for by your housekeeper and left on the entry table. She had rehearsed that part. What came next she had not. Was it thrown away? He took a breath that seemed to be part of some longer calculation. My son found it. He is 9. He read the card in the lift on the way up from school, and he decided it was addressed to him. The refrigerator clicked and settled. Adeyeze put the paper down. It has been 11 days, he continued, in the same level voice a man uses to read out figures. The flowers are dead. They have been dead for a week. He will not let the housekeeper remove them. Every evening he carries a measuring cup from the kitchen and changes the water in the vase, and then he puts the card back in the sleeve of his pencil case, and he goes to bed. The rain thickened against the shop window. Across the street, the fruit seller was dragging his awning down with a pole. His mother died in March, he said. He has not spoken since the 26th of March. Not to me, not to his teachers. He writes when he must. Adeyeze did not say, I'm sorry. She had learned in this country that the phrase arrived too fast and meant too little, and she had learned in her own family that grief did not want to be answered, only witnessed. So she stood with her hands flat on the counter, and she let the silence be long enough to be real. 9 days, she said at last. I wrote a number down without knowing anything. That was careless of me. It was accurate. That is not the same as careless. He reached inside his coat and set a business card next to the envelope, squaring it with 2 fingers. The card gave a company whose name she had seen on the flank of 2 buildings between here and Yoksum, a title, and beneath the title a personal name printed so small it seemed almost like a private matter. Through the window, at the loading bay she was not permitted to use, a black sedan sat with its hazards blinking and a driver standing in the rain beside it, and a traffic enforcement officer was already photographing the plate. Your car is being fined, she said. Yes. I am telling you because you may want to move it. Not because I am changing my answer, she finished. Yoon Do-jin did not look at the window. He looked at her hands, which were wet to the wrist from the buckets, and then at the roll of green florist tape on the counter, as though the tape had asked the question instead. "It's fine," he said. "It's 40,000 won, yes, I know what 40,000 won is." Adeze wiped her palms on her apron. 40,000 won was 8 bunches of baby's breath at the Yangjae market at 4 in the morning, if she smiled at the wholesaler and took the ones with brown edges she could trim. It was the deposit on the compressor repair she had been postponing since the 9th of the month. It was 2 full days of what the shop actually earned after Mrs. Gu's rent, and the electricity that the cooler drank all summer. She had learned the exact shape of that number, the way a person learns the exact shape of a stair they trip on. He had heard it and answered. Yes. The way other people said. Bless you. Out in the lane, the rain came down in the fine, slanting way that soaked a person without ever seeming to fall hard. The driver stood at attention beside the rear door with water running off the brim of his nose, one hand still resting on the handle as if the car might wander off. The enforcement officer had finished with the plate and was now photographing the yellow line the sedan's tire had crossed. Patient, unhurried, a man who had photographed 1,000 such lines. Adeze took the shop's spare umbrella out of the tin bucket by the door. It was the one with the broken rib and the printed advertisement for a chicken restaurant that had closed 2 winters ago. She stepped out into the lane, past the ticket officer, past the immaculate paint of the car she had been told twice by the building manager never to stand near with her flower cart, and held it out to the driver. He looked at it the way a soldier looks at an order from the wrong army. "I'm fine, ma'am. Your collar is wet through. Take it, please. It has a bad rib, so hold it to the left." He took it. He was perhaps 60, with iron in his hair and a name tag that said bake, and he did exactly what she had known he would do. He raised the umbrella and angled it not over himself, but over the seam of the car door, where water might get in when the passenger came out. Adeze went back inside without commenting on this. In her experience, telling a man like that to cover his own head only embarrassed him twice. From inside the shop, through glass fogged at its lower edge, Dojin watched the whole small transaction. 20 seconds. A broken umbrella handed to a driver who had stood in rain for 11 years without once being handed anything, and no glance back to see whether it had been noticed. That was the detail Dojin could not put down. In the world he had been raised inside, kindness arrived with witnesses. It came photographed at ribbon cuttings, itemized in year-end reports, calculated to the exact number of rice sacks that would appear in a newspaper caption. He had signed off on 9 billion won of it last quarter and felt nothing at all. 20 seconds in an alley in Ixiondong, and something in his chest had shifted the way furniture shifts in a truck, quietly, permanently, in a way you only discover when you open the door. She came back in, shaking water from her sleeves. "That was your umbrella," he said. "It was broken." Adeze pulled a bucket of white chrysanthemums closer with her foot and picked up her shears. 2 ribs. "It opens if you hold it to the left. You told him. He is standing in rain. I am standing in a shop." She stripped a stem in one motion, thorn to thumb, and dropped the leaves into a plastic tub. "You are also standing in my shop, and your car is still being fined." "Yes. I have said that twice now." "You have." She did not look up, and he understood, watching her hands, that she had already decided he was a weather condition, something that would pass over the alley and leave the alley unchanged. He stood among the buckets in his $4,000 coat while she conditioned 40 stems for a funeral in Mapo, and for the first time in perhaps 6 years, he had no idea what the correct sentence was. Across the alley, under the awning of the coffee stand that opened at 7, a young man in a delivery jacket stopped scrolling and raised his phone. He filmed the car first. The plate, the low black shape of it wedged into an alley built for handcarts, the parking officer bending at the windshield with her scanner. Then he tilted upward, and through the shop's fogged glass he caught 2 figures standing very close to each other among flowers. 12 seconds of video. He did not know whose car it was. He did know that the alley behind the tourist street was not where cars like that lived, and he knew which online community paid attention to such things. The officer printed the ticket, sealed it in its plastic sleeve, and pressed it to the glass with the flat of her hand. 40,000 won. Baek accepted it with both hands and a small apologetic bow, as though he had personally caused the width of the street. Dojin came out at 9:52. He took the ticket from his driver, glanced at it, and folded it into his inside pocket the way a man folds a receipt for something he intends to keep. "Chairman," Bake said, "your umbrella. It is not mine," she said to hold it to the left. "Then hold it to the left." Bake held it to the left, over the seam of the door. Rain came off the awning in a single rope of water and missed them both. By 11 the next morning, the video had 400,000 views and a title that made Adaze put down her phone and press her palms flat on the counter. Someone had matched the plate. Someone else had matched the coat. A third person had zoomed on the shop's hand-painted sign, Oma Flowers, and under it, smaller, in Korean, the word for flowers written in a foreigner's careful upright hand, and the comments had gone where comments go. Chairman Yoo Do-jin, 52 minutes. An alley shop with no name anyone recognized. A woman none of them could identify from behind, only enough of her to be certain she was not Korean. Adaeze read 11 comments and stopped, which she considered restraint. Then she opened her ledger, because the ledger was the only argument she trusted. Rent, 1,400,000, due on the 19th. Wholesale bill at the Yangjae market, 812,000, payable Friday, and Mr. An did not extend credit twice. Chinaza's second semester fees in Enugu, her sister had sent the invoice with 3 smiling emojis and no request attached, which was its own kind of request. Visa renewal in March, which required proof of business revenue over a threshold she cleared by a margin so thin she had learned to think of it as a line rather than a margin. Against that, 1 column of reliable money, Hanul Tower, 12 standing household orders and the lobby arrangement, refreshed every Tuesday and Friday, 940,000 won a month, plus the corridor vases the association had added in September. 8 months of arriving at the service entrance at 6:15, of bowing to the night guard, of learning which of the 12 wanted lilies removed because of a cat, and which one wanted the water changed even though she was not paid to change water. At 11:40 the phone rang, and it was the management office. The woman on the line was polite in the way of people reading from a note. There had been an incident report. A delivery to the wrong residence on the 22nd of last month. Building security had been required to escort a non-resident above the restricted floors. The Residents Association had met. Under the circumstances, and with regret, external florist access would be reviewed, and in the meantime the standing orders were suspended. Suspended, Adaeze repeated. Reviewed, the woman said. There is a form. Also, one of the households has raised a separate concern about privacy. Which household? I am not able to say. Adaeze looked at the calendar on the wall, at Tuesday and Friday inked in for the next 4 months, at the small blue stars she drew on days she met her numbers. I delivered to the 41st floor because your lobby directory lists 41B and 4-1B on the same line, and your night guard sent me up. I have said this in writing. I have apologized in writing. There is a form, the woman said again, kindly, and that was the whole of it. She hung up and stood very still for a moment, hands on the counter, the shop smelling of chrysanthemum and cut eucalyptus and wet cardboard. Then she wrote the figure in the ledger, in red, because pretending was expensive. At 3:20 a woman came in who did not look at the flowers. She was perhaps 55, in a wool coat the color of oatmeal, with a scar the length of a matchstick under her jaw, and she stood in the middle of the shop the way people stand in rooms they are assessing, not visiting. You wrote this, she said, and laid the card on the counter. It had been carried. The corners had gone soft as cloth, and the ink of the last line was gray where a thumb had passed over it too many times. Whoever you are, someone thought of you today. Please let them. I did, she said, by mistake. My son keeps nothing. The woman's hand stayed folded over her handbag. He kept that. I wanted to see what sort of person writes it. A pause, measured like a cut stem. The building has withdrawn its complaint. There is no form for that. I signed my name instead. Then she ordered white chrysanthemums for a Thursday and asked that they be brought by hand, 41B, the correct one, and afterward the cemetery road out past Yongju. At 7:40 the shop lights went to half. She drew a blue line through the red figure in the ledger and wrote nothing beneath it. The card stayed where the woman had left it, propped against the water pitcher, facing the door, the way a nameplate faces a street, so that whoever arrived would know they had come to the right place. The shutter came down in 3 pulls, the way it always did, the third one needing her whole shoulder. Amaka locked it, tested it, then stood a moment on the wet slope of the alley while the smell of somebody's frying garlic came down from a second-floor window. Her hands smelled of chrysanthemum stems and cold water. They always did by evening. On the bus she stood even though there were seats, because sitting after 10 hours made her legs argue in the morning, and she held the rail with 2 fingers and let the city slide past in wet orange. Her mother called at 9, which was 1 in the afternoon in Enugu. "Did you eat?" "I ate." "What did you eat?" Amaka looked at the plastic bag in her hand, which held 1 boiled egg, a triangle of gimbap, and 2 tangerines the greengrocer had pressed on her because they were bruised. "Rice," she said, "and fish." Her mother let the lie stand, which was its own kind of love, and moved on to Chidi's school fees, the 2nd installment, due in 11 days. Amaka said the words she always said, "Send me the account number again. I will move it on Friday." When the call ended, she sat down on the low wall outside her building and did the arithmetic she had refused to write under the blue line in the ledger. 4 months of standing flowers, unpaid. Delivery fuel, 2 ribbons. The white spray roses that had cost her 90,001 and gone up to the wrong floor in a building where the elevator required a card she did not have, and a doorman who had looked at her twice before he looked at the invoice. She could have billed for them. She could have called the number on the order and explained, in her careful, slightly formal Korean, that the loss was not hers. She did not want to explain. Explaining was a small door, and she had gone through too many of them. 51 floors above the river, in a room where the lights came up as a person entered and dimmed as they left, the man from 1A sat with his tie loosened and a small white card lying on the black stone of the counter. It was ordinary cardstock, the kind sold in packs of 50. The handwriting on it was upright, patient, foreign in the way that a careful hand is always slightly foreign. Each stroke finished, nothing hurried. 1 character corrected and rewritten so the ink sat heavier there than anywhere else. He had read it 4 times before he understood that it had not been written by the person who signed it. Somebody had written it on somebody else's behalf. Somebody had listened to a sentence too heavy to hold and had put it down in ink for a stranger, and then had made the effort. This was the part that kept him at the counter with his jacket still on, to write it beautifully. He turned the card over. On the back, a shop stamp faded, 1 line of an address in a district he had driven through and never once stopped in. "Find the shop," he said to nobody, and then, because there was always somebody, to the phone. At 8:15 the next morning, Amaka carried the replacement arrangement into the correct building, the correct elevator, the correct door, 1B, and the woman who opened it was 81 years old and wore lipstick to receive flowers. "They said yesterday," the woman said, not unkindly. "Yesterday they went to the wrong door." "That was my fault." Amaka set the vase where the morning light would reach it by 11 and turned it so the open faces pointed into the room. "So today they are better. Yesterday's were only good." The old woman laughed once, a dry crack of a sound, and then held the doorframe and said, "Sit, 2 minutes. I will die if I drink this tea alone." Amaka sat for 6 minutes. She learned that the flowers were for a husband 49 years married and 3 years gone, that his photograph did not like direct sun, and that the son who paid for the standing order had never once come to see where the money went. When she stood to leave, the old woman pressed a boiled sweet into her palm as though she were 9 years old, and Amaka thanked her in the polite form, twice, and let herself be walked to the elevator. Then the cemetery road out past Yangju, 2 buses and a taxi she could not afford, the last stretch on foot up a hill where the concrete gave way to gravel and the wind came off the ridge with the smell of pine and cold stone. She carried the bucket in one hand and the shears in her coat pocket. Row 11, the 4th stone, a name she had learned to say correctly by practicing on the bus, because a name said badly is a small insult, and the dead had done nothing to deserve one. The old flowers had gone brown at the edges. She lifted them out, tipped the green water into the gravel, wiped the granite with the cloth she kept folded in her pocket, and set the new stems in. 3 tall, 5 low, the way she had been taught by a woman in a market in Onitsha who had never seen snow. Nobody was paying her for this. Nobody had paid her since August. She trimmed the last stem, turned the arrangement to face the path, and stepped back, so that whoever arrived would know they had come to the right place. Down at the bottom of the hill, an engine idled, a black sedan, parked badly, 1 door already open, and the man walking up toward her through the pines held something small and white between 2 fingers. He walked badly on gravel. City shoes, thin soles, the the kind made for marble lobbies and the 8 steps between a car door and an elevator. Twice he put a hand out to the trunk of a pine to steady himself, and twice he pretended he had not. She did not stand up to meet him. She finished folding the cloth into her pocket. She gathered the wet stems she had trimmed into a plastic bag, because the caretaker was 71, and swept this hill alone, and only then did she rise and turn, wiping her palms on her jeans. He stopped 4 paces away, close enough to speak, far enough not to crowd her. "You are far from the office," she said. "It's Saturday." "It has been Saturday for 11 months. The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile. The place where a smile would go if he ever let one finish. He held up the thing between his fingers. She knew the shape before she knew the words on it. 3 inches by 2, cheap cardstock, the kind she bought in packs of 200 at the wholesale market in Yangjae, because the pretty ones cost 4 times as much, and nobody kept them anyway. This one had been kept. The corners had gone soft and round, the way paper goes when it lives in a wallet. The ink had faded from black to the color of weak tea. "You wrote this in an elevator," he said. "In the service corridor. The elevator only stops at 1 penthouse." She looked at it, then at him. The wrong one. He turned it so she could read her own handwriting, though she did not need to. "These were meant for somebody else. Keep them anyway. Somebody should send you flowers." "I was going to bill your neighbor for them," she said. "I never did." "I know. I checked." He said it plainly, the way he said everything, and then he turned the card over. On the back, in pencil, in small square handwriting that had clearly been done in a moving car, were dates. 14 of them. Every second Saturday since August, and 4 Fridays besides. "What are those?" "The days I drove up this hill," he said, and stayed in the car. The wind came through the pines the way it does on that slope in October, dry and thin, and moved the chrysanthemums she had just set. 3 tall, 5 low, facing the path. Neither of them spoke for a while. Below, the badly parked sedan sat with its door still open, and the driver stood beside it with his hands behind his back, patient as a man who has waited 11 years and expects to wait more. "Your mother paid me every Friday," she said at last. "Cash in an envelope, always folded twice. She counted it in front of me each time so I would not think she trusted me. She didn't trust anyone. She trusted the flowers." She crouched lower, to press the stems firm, thumbing the wet grit level around them the way she did in the shop before a delivery went out. He took the card out of his coat then, not from a wallet, from the inner pocket, where men keep things they have decided about. The paper had gone soft at the fold, folded twice, and the ink had bled where a thumb had passed over it too many times. 11 years, she said. "I read it in the elevator." He did not look at her. "Wrong floor, wrong name, wrong woman entirely. I kept it anyway. It was written for a stranger. It found one." She let that stand. Below them, the driver closed the sedan door at last, gently, as if the hillside were a house with someone sleeping in it. They walked down together, unhurried, her hands still marked with soil, his coat holding the card back in its pocket. At the bottom, in the van's rear window, the boy had drawn something in the fog of his own breathing and left it there. 3 tall marks, 5 low, all facing the path. Then he wiped a small circle clear and watched them come.